We saw in the previous sample how the rooks are dealing with the opponent's weak pawns. Now in this one we will see how they are cooperating with our own pass pawns. This is the game Alekhine with the white pieces against Lilienthal from the Hastings tournament 1933. Alekhine is trying to win this position with his two rooks, and the first move that he does is a pawn sacrifice. He is advancing his pawn with the move h4. He doesn't really pay so much attention to the pawn on c4, and indeed this is the only way for him to play for a win. Weakening moves like b3 here will help black after that to try and to construct ideas of perpetual checks. There are too many weaknesses around the white king, and this is something that the queen enjoys, and most likely this game will end in a perpetual check if there are too many weaknesses. But h4, putting everything on the pawn in this situation is the right approach. Black has nothing else but to take the pawn on c4, and after king b1 he needs to try and to stop that pawn as fast as possible, and at best to try to stop it the furthest possible from the promotional square. After queen f4, rook d to d1, queen h6, g4, black defended with the move king to d8. It was slightly better for him, probably maybe even much better for him to play king to d7. As we will see later, d6 square would be very important for the defense of the second player, but instead of that he played king d8. Now Alekhine goes rook d to e1. First of all, he is cutting the enemy king away from the queen. As we saw in the previous sample, in situations like that, when one of the sides has passers, we are trying to block the passer with the weakest possible piece here. This is the king, and Alekhine is correctly trying to exclude the king from the defense and to keep the queen busy on h6. Next, a5 was played, and that's a very instructive and very important moment for us. a5 is the best chance that black has in situations like that, because if he stays where he is, white is going to prepare the advance of the pawns, and even on the expense of another pawn, he will freeze the black queen, and then we know from the previous sample how the rooks are cooperating in a good way to unblock that pawn and to promote it. Thus, the only chance for black in this situation is to try and to open this king a bit, and for that he is advancing the pawns. He's trying to create some weaknesses and to open a bit that piece in order to give perpetual check. So this was the right thing that he did. What he did wrong was that he didn't follow the plan correctly after that. So after a4, after a5, h5 was played, a4, the idea is obvious, a3, and after that, if white takes or pushes the pawn, this king is already uncovered, and the queen is ready to jump here and to start giving checks. So a3 was the move that Alekhine played to stop this, and black reacted with f6, and this is the actual mistake. From now on, his game is going into difficulties, and most likely he's going to lose. Instead of that, he just needed to follow the plan which he has started, and the right move was b5, very strong one. Now b4 is coming, and after that, if needed, a3 on the next move. For instance, g5, the plan that Alekhine did in the game. Queen takes g5, h6. The pawn is trying to distract the queen from the checks, but the queen is giving a check on g6. King a1. For the time being, we can block the pawn with queen h7, but after rook e to g1, the tempo is used for the advance of the pawn on b4 and for further opening the king. Now the threat is to take on a3, which will be the case, say, after rook g7, queen c2, black is going to take on a3 on the next move. And if white takes on a3 on b4 himself, actually here after rook g7, the queen can also go on e4 first, and after that we will take on a3 with the tempo because the rook is hanging. That's even better than queen c2. While if white takes on b4, Then a3 is strong, b takes a3, and the queen is coming on d3, and the perpetual check cannot be avoided. Even though this pawn is so close to the promotion, there is nothing that white can do to save the king from the checks. In that line, also on move number 35, instead of g5, Alekhine can try to prepare the advance of the pawns by playing king a2, trying to meet the advance of the black pawns on the queen side, but then b4 is still very strong. The reason for that is that after a takes b4, queen is coming on d2, and in case of h6 there is check. The king cannot go any further on a3 because it would be checkmated. It has to come back, and still we have the same method, a3, after which there is nothing but perpetual check. Say h7, ab2, king takes b2, queen d2 check, and you can check it for yourselves, but it is a perpetual check. White lacked only one tempo in this line to win the game. Back to the game where f6 was played, which is also very logical. Black is stopping the pawn from going on g5, but Alekhine finds a way to push that pawn anyways. First of all, he goes rook e6, and here we see why the king was better placed on d7. And also in the previous lines, when the pawn was promoted sometimes on h8 with the tempo, this also mattered. So rook e6, king d7, and g5 is an excellent move. Now he needs to take it. He took it with the queen, and the pawn is moving forward. White is even sacrificing temporarily the rook, but concretely the pawn will become a queen if black takes it. So he didn't take it in the game, and he played instead of that the move queen to g2. But okay, now queen g2 is answered rook e to e1. The pawn has reached the 6th rank. Black will have to block it on the h7 square. Check was given, and queen h7, but with the pawn so close, white already has various tactical ways to try and to further on push the pawns. First of all, he is using the second rook to unblock the pawn. It's a typical picture. One of the rooks is defending the pawn from behind, and the other one is setting the pawn free with rook g7. Again, it doesn't really matter where this king is, even if it is on f7 or on f8, it cannot help the queen. The queen is too expensive, too powerful to be traded for only one rook. Rook eg1, king e6, rook g7, the only chance is to counterattack. Like he did with the queen on e4 to hit the rook, otherwise the pawn is promoted very quickly. Rook e to g1, rook h to g1, sorry, queen h4, h7, and the pawn is just one step away from the promotion. Now there is nothing that black can do. Plus, white has active rooks, and the rooks start to take pawns. b5 was played, rook takes c7, queen h5. The thing that black was using before that to try to discover, the idea that he was using before to try to discover the king is no longer working, because white can simply take on b4, and after a3 he can also place this rook behind the second pass pawn. That pawn on b4 has become also a passer, and after some preparation white is going to advance it and to win the game. Therefore queen h5 was played in the game. Rook e1 check now, king d5, king k2, unimportant preparatory move. Now after king d4, the idea is that the king is no longer on the first rank, and white can even use some small tactics. Rook d1 check to win yet another pawn, the one on d6. Obviously the queen cannot take it because there will be a new queen on h8 coming, and there is no perpetual check as the rook is covering the king, and that's it, the game is won. So therefore after rook d1 check, king e4 was played, rook takes d6, queen e8, rook takes f6, all the pawns disappears from the board, queen h8, once again now the rook is coming behind the pawn, and the end is very close, king f4. It is very close, but there is another instructive moment in this game. Alekhine hurried up to cash in his advantage, and he played Rook c8. In the game it worked, but he walked into a draw by playing the move Rook c8. Instead of that, he needed not to hurry, he just needed to defend the back rank with Rook h1. He has all the time in the world here. Next, he can play Rook c8 whenever he likes to deflect the queen and to promote the pawn on h8. And there is nothing that black can do to stop this. He can also put his king on a1 if he likes, if he needs that before converting the advantage. The move Rook c8 that he played is flashy, but in reality black actually missed a draw here after queen takes c8, Rook h4 check. Instead of moving the king on g5, after which he lost the game anyway, he needed to play king f3, when suddenly he can create a perpetual check. After h8, there is this check, king b1, queen e1 check. The queen is a mighty piece, and perpetual check is one of the things that you should be looking for in bad situations. And now, if the king goes on c2, the key defensive move is not queen e2, after which the king escapes via c3 to either d4 or b4, but the move queen f2, which was obviously missed by the two opponents, was the right one, after which the game is drawn. The main reason is that king c3 is no longer winning, as there is queen c5 check, and the king cannot go anywhere. King d3 would be answered queen e3, etc., and this is a forced draw. Surprisingly, both the opponents missed this one, and after king g5, h8 queen, queen e6 check, king b1, queen e1 check, king c2, queen e2. The king escaped, and he resigned. In this situation, Lily and Tao. So the moral of this example: if you have the two rooks and passers, try to give all the support to one of your passers with one of the rooks, preferably from behind. Try to advance it as much as you can to freeze the opponent's queen to defend against that pawn, and after that you will have a free rook in the play on the other side of the board, and you can grab pawns or you can try to unblock the pawn.